welcome back. Now, polls have closed following parliamentary elections in Lebanon. It was the first vote since a devastating explosion in the port of Beirut nearly 2 years ago and takes place amid a crippling economic crisis that has left 3/4 of the population in poverty. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has the story.
It's election day in Lebanon, and for many in the land of cedars, they couldn't have come at a more crucial time.
Things are very expensive, and there is no electricity, no water. I just hope things get better.
I'll crawl on my hands and knees to vote. I don't need this wheelchair. I'll crawl on my hands and knees, like this, to vote.
These are the first elections since 2018 and only the third since 2009. And these have been a very rough 4 years for Lebanese, with an economic meltdown that plunged 3/4 of the population into poverty, deadly sectarian clashes in the streets, wide-scale protests against the ruling political elite, and the massive Beirut port blast in August 2020, a tragedy that has yet to see anyone held accountable.
We hope for change, even a small one, to start the journey. To get rid of sectarianism and corruption, we have high hopes.
But perhaps more than anything, these elections are seen as a test for the heavily armed Iran-backed Hezbollah and its allies, who hope to preserve their majority in parliament.
They want you today to give up the resistance and to give up the weapons of the resistance. But their campaign against us is not through airstrikes nor artillery shelling. Rather, it's political, media, economic, and financial.
The pro-Hezbollah bloc is led by the Christian Free Patriotic Movement, headed by President Michel Aoun's son-in-law, Gibran Bassil, as well as the two main Shiite movements, Hezbollah and Amal. The opposing bloc is championed by former Phalange leader Samir Jaja and his Christian Lebanese forces. As for the Sunnis, their leadership has called for a boycott of these elections. Despite the heavy security presence in the streets, throughout the country clashes erupted between supporters of the opposing sides, including rival Christian supporters burning Lebanese forces posters. Last elections, the Lebanese forces doubled in strength, and Jaja is seen as the biggest threat to Hezbollah, whose supporters accused him of being a Zionist in a rally last week. That's because these elections will also determine who will replace Lebanon's 88-year-old president, Michel Aoun, a Hezbollah ally.
Citizens cannot be impartial in a fundamental issue of government. I hope that every Lebanese will go out and vote today.
But unlike Aoun, you shouldn't get your hopes up, as voter turnout is expected to be even lower than 2018's 49%. And so, despite hopes for change, Lebanese appear to be in store for more of the same, and the country's collapse to continue or worsen.
Well, for more on the Lebanese election, we're joined in the studio by our Middle East correspondent, Sarah Shalala, and David Daoud is with us as well. He's a Hezbollah and Lebanon research analyst at United Against Nuclear Iran. Hello to you both. So, Sarah, I'll start with you. Do you have any idea about the level of turnout so far and what that might tell us?
Look, the world is definitely watching and waiting, Laura, to see what will unfold with these election results. The turnout, obviously, among the Lebanese diaspora in about 58 different countries has been really, really positive. It's been about 60% turnout. We do have to wait for the next day or so until all the voting is counted, and then the Interior Ministry will then release its results about what these election results will be. Its polls have closed. They were open from about 7 this morning, but right now over 1,000 candidates from 103 lists are running in these elections, but there's only 128 parliamentary seats up for grabs, and that's divided among all the 18 different religious sects, so 64 going to the Christians and 64 going to the Muslims, which then makes up 128 seats within parliament altogether. When results come out, which will be soon, the new parliament will not only be able to represent the country for the next 4 years, but they'll also be choosing their next president in October. So that means that when Michel Aoun's 6-year mandate will come to an end, end in October. He won't be in power after that because the law stipulates that presidents cannot rule for any longer than 6 years. But this also means that almost immediately after the members are chosen, they'll also be electing their new Prime Minister and their new Speaker of Parliament. So currently it's Najib Mikati as Prime Minister. He's a Sunni Muslim. The Speaker of Parliament right now is Nabi Berri. He's a Sunni Muslim. So he is looking to go into and run for this seat again. We're not too sure about Mikati at the moment. We'll just have to wait and see. But Lebanon has this really unique and complex sectarian powers sharing agreement that it's got going on, and that's because it's long been influenced by religion. So basically that's why you have to have a president who's Maronite Christian, a Sunni Muslim in the Prime Minister chair, and opposed for the Shiite Muslim for the Speaker of Parliament.
Right. And some critics say that very system is actually perpetuating a lot of corruption in the country. Let's bring in David Dowd. David, given the system, given the level of political apathy and the ongoing economic crisis, is there any hope at all that this election might bring change to Lebanon?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. I think, let me reframe the answer a little bit. I don't think had there been more political participation that change would have occurred. I'm speaking to a friend of mine who was part of the October 17th, 2019 activist movement, the so-called revolution. He's boycotting the election. He's saying, this is kind of a rejection of Nasrallah specifically, but I think it's a rejection of the entire system, because I think the people who are staying home realize that had they not voted, nothing would have made a difference. The system would have remained the same, and conditions would have remained the same.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see the official turnout figures, but that does seem to be the case with what people are saying on the streets. And Sarah, this is also the first vote in Lebanon, isn't it, since protests erupted back in 2019. Did that have the effect of shaking up the system you've just described to us at all?
Yeah, so the last elections they held was in 2018, but they've had many postponements over the years, 2013, 2014, 2017. Finally, we're here. There's another election, but these ones are high stakes. They're highly competitive and also highly unpredictable as well. And that's because of the uprising, the Thawra, as the Lebanese call it, that we saw in 2019. That uprising brought about some results in the political system that we're currently seeing in the elections going on today. And whether it's good or not good changes, well, that's up to the people to decide. But the first is a real decline in the Christian population support for the leading Christian party, which is the Free Patriotic Movement, which is currently ruling. The second is the rise in Lebanese voters from the diaspora. Again, we had a real turnout this year. And the third is the weakening of the Sunnis, the camp opposed to Hezbollah, that especially after the resignation of their former Prime Minister, Saad al-Hariri. And the fourth is a long series of new parties, new faces on the scene that have emerged after the October Revolution that have come to the fore now, so these new independent parties, they want change and they want a functioning leadership and they want to be in power to get Lebanon out of the massive hole that the current ruling elite has basically
they're trying
done itself into.
Break into the system, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And David, there's been a lot of speculation that this vote might in fact strengthen Hezbollah, especially because of the fact that the Sunni bloc has kind of taken a step back. Is that the case? And if so, what are the implications for Lebanon and indeed for the region?
I think with the last voter turnout I saw from the last state, around 32 hours before polls get closed. Usually when there's low voter turnout, it's usually the most motivated that tend to go to the polls. So it could be that Hezbollah's voting bloc or voting or supporters are the ones that are going out with the Lebanese forces are also equally motivated. Could it strengthen them? I think they'll remain strong regardless. Again, the point that I've been making at the outset is that if we go back to when the pro-Hezbollah parliamentary bloc had a minority in the government, and March 14th had a majority in the government, Hezbollah was still able to maintain its arsenal outside of the authority of the state. It was still able to grow in power. It was still able to enter Syria and enter into the Syrian civil war without any regard for Lebanese state authority. So again, I don't think these parliamentary elections, irrespective of the results, are going to have an impact on Hezbollah's activity. And so long as that happens, so long as that is the case, so long as Hezbollah remains at its current strength, nothing in the system is going to, because the group are act as a security guard, for lack of a better term, for the rest of the corrupt political system.
David Dowd, many thanks indeed. Sarah Shalala, thank you to you as well. And we will, of course, have coverage of the results of that election when those results come in.